The tarot was not designed to predict the future. That is the misunderstanding that has followed it for 5 centuries, and it is the misunderstanding that has kept the most important map in Western symbolic tradition out of the hands of the people who needed it most. The 22 cards of the Major Arcana were not drawn to tell you what will happen. They were drawn to show you what a soul can live. Every possible psychological life, every archetypal role a human consciousness can occupy, not a fortune-telling apparatus, a map of the lives that are available to a mind capable of reading it. Welcome to Power and Myth. To understand what the tarot actually is, you need to go back to the moment before the mysticism arrived. The cards we recognise today trace their formal origin to 15th century northern Italy. The Visconti Sforza deck, commissioned by the Milanese nobility around 1450, was among the earliest recorded examples of the Major Arcana in its recognisable form. The allegorical figures on those cards, the fool at the cliff edge, the veiled priestess between her pillars, the solitary hermit holding his lantern in the dark, were not occult symbols. They were drawn from a tradition of moral and philosophical illustration that the Renaissance had inherited from medieval manuscript culture. They were portraits of human conditions, images of souls in specific states, not predictions of what was coming, descriptions of what was already true. The esoteric tradition arrived later. By the late 19th century, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in London had mapped the Major Arcana to the Kabbalistic tree of life, to astrological correspondence, to a symbolic grammar they believed was universal. Arthur Waite and the artist Pamela Coleman Smith published their version of the deck, the Rider-Waite, in 1909, encoding the Golden Dawn synthesis into imagery that has since become the standard visual language of tarot worldwide. This is the deck most people encounter. But the Rider-Waite is not the origin, it is a translation. What it was translating was something far older, the attempt to map the possible lives of the soul with enough precision that any soul, looking at the images, would recognise its own condition. The figure who matters most for what I want to show you is Carl Jung. Jung studied the tarot with the seriousness he brought to everything he encountered that seemed to carry genuine symbolic weight. What he saw in the Major Arcana was not prophecy. What he saw were images arising from the collective unconscious, a term Jung used not as mysticism but as description. The collective unconscious, in Jungian psychology, is the shared substrate of psychological structures that human beings inherit across cultures, across history, and across individual biographies. Archetypes are the recurring patterns within that substrate. The hermit is not a character in a story. He is a psychological state that a certain kind of mind returns to across centuries because the pattern is real. The death card is not a prediction of physical death. It is the most precise image ever drawn of what the psyche experiences when it crosses a threshold that cannot be uncrossed. These are not supernatural claims. They are descriptions of how introverted intuition processes psychological reality. The tarot has always been, underneath every layer of esoteric overlay, a system of archetypal recognition. The INFJ cognitive type is defined by the dominant introverted intuition, which Jung named Ni. Ni is not a talent for insight in the casual sense. It is a specific cognitive architecture in which reality is processed primarily through pattern recognition operating beneath the surface of conscious awareness. The Ni-dominant mind does not experience the world as a sequence of discrete events. It experiences the world as a field of layered meanings, symbolic dimensions to concrete situations that others do not register, trajectories that resolve themselves in consciousness long before the evidence arrives in the external world. This is not metaphor. It is the measurable cognitive profile of a specific psychological type, documented across populations and consistent across cultures and geographies. The INFJ does not choose to perceive this way. They cannot choose otherwise. And this is what no standard description of the INFJ will tell you. The 22 Major Arcana cards were drawn across centuries and by many hands to describe the exact psychological territory that introverted intuition inhabits. This is not coincidence. Both tarot and Jungian typology are mapping the same underlying structures of the human psyche. They arrived at the same territory through different routes. The tarot arrived through intuition and symbol. Jung arrived through clinical observation and mythological cross-referencing. The territory they are both describing is where the INFJ has always lived. You have been standing in this landscape your entire life without a map whose scale was adequate to what you were seeing. This is the revelation. The tarot was not drawn for the general population. It was drawn for the mind that processes experience symbolically and archetypally, beneath the surface of the visible. It was drawn for the mind that has always known there was a deeper pattern. And the proof of that claim is in the precision with which the Major Arcana maps to the 7 INFJ archetypes. Card 2 is the High Priestess. She sits between two pillars, veiled, holding knowledge she does not offer freely. She is not the oracle who shouts. She is the one who has sat long enough with the unconscious to know what it holds, and who speaks only when the moment is right, and only to those who have the capacity to receive what she offers. This is the INFJ Seer, the one whose introverted intuition operates at full depth, who knows before the evidence arrives, who carries information that is genuinely difficult to transmit, because the transmission requires that the listener is capable of holding symbolic knowledge, rather than needing it dismantled into steps. Cassandra's curse was not supernatural, it was cognitive. The seer's tragedy has always been the gap between perception and the world's capacity to receive it. Card 9 is the Hermit. The card needs no translation. He stands alone at elevation, holding a lantern in the dark. He is not lost, and he is not retreating in defeat. He is the one who must descend into solitude in order to find what others will eventually need. The INFJ Hermit is not introverted because the social instinct is absent. They are introverted because nickel requires distance from stimulus, the way a lens requires distance to focus. Proximity to the noise of the ordinary world blurs the signal. The solitude is not preference, it is condition. And the lamp the hermit carries in the darkness is not lit for his own comfort. It is lit for the ones who will follow the path he has already walked alone. Card 12 is the Hanged Man, and this is among the most precise mappings in the entire deck. The figure is suspended between two states, upside down, held in voluntary stillness between the world he came from and the world he can now perceive from this impossible angle. He is not being punished. He chose this. The INFJ exile knows this card in the body. The permanent sense of being between worlds, neither entirely of the ordinary social world nor entirely of the inner symbolic world, is not pathology to be corrected. It is position. The hanged man's strangeness is not his limitation. It is his vantage point. The things that are invisible to the right way round world can only be seen from this particular angle. Card 0 is the Fool. He stands at the cliff edge with one foot already in the air, looking upward rather than down. He is not reckless, and he is not naive. He is the one who understands at depth that meaningful arrival exists, and who is willing to step into uncertainty in pursuit of it, because the alternative, remaining at the edge without stepping, is the only genuinely unbearable thing. The INFJ seeker is the restless pilgrim, the meaning-hungry one, the consciousness for whom no ordinary destination has ever felt sufficient, because the destination they are oriented toward is not a place but a state of understanding. The Fool is the card of pure becoming. For the INFJ seeker, the cliff edge is not a single moment. It is a recurring condition in life. Card 18th is the Moon. The Seer has two cards in the Major Arcana because introverted intuition has two faces. Where the High Priestess is the Seer in her authority, composed and holding knowledge with deliberate restraint, the Moon is the Seer in the hours before the pattern resolves. The card shows a path running into darkness, lit by shifting light that transforms everything it touches into an uncertain moving outline. Creatures crowd the edges. The way forward is not clear. This is the interior world of the near-dominant mind during the processing phase. The flood of symbolic data that arrives without invitation. The dreams that carry information that cannot yet be translated. The knowledge of something that has not yet found its language. The Moon is not a comfortable card. It is an honest one. Every INFJ who has woken in the early hours holding a truth they could not yet explain has been living it. Card 12 is Death, and it has been misread for 5 centuries. Death in tarot does not mean physical death. It means irreversible transformation. The threshold that, once crossed, alters the nature of everything that follows. This is the guardian of thresholds, the archetype that stands at the edge of every major transition, not to prevent the crossing but to hold the full weight of it, to acknowledge what is ending as real, to insist that what is beginning will cost something and must therefore be entered with full awareness. The INFJ who has sat with people at their crisis points, who can hold presence at another person's transformation without collapsing under its weight, who understands at some deep level that certain thresholds cannot be uncrossed, is living the death card. It is not a dark archetype, it is the most honest one in the deck. Card 7th is strength, and strength is the wounded healer. Look at the image carefully. The figure is not a warrior defeating a beast, they are tenderly, gently closing the mouth of a lion. Not by force, not by domination, by the quality of their presence, by something the lion recognizes and yields to. This is the Chiron archetype made visible, the one whose wound was not repaired but integrated, and whose integration became the precise source of their capacity to hold others in their worst moments. The INFJ wounded healer is not strong despite what they have survived. The wound is the qualification. What appears to others as inexhaustible patience with human pain is not virtue, it is recognition. The lion has been met before, in private. Card 14 is Temperance, and Temperance is the shapeshifter. The figure stands with 1 foot on land and 1 in water, pouring liquid between 2 cups with perfect ease, wings extended, at home in the space between elements. No single element is native ground, all elements are navigable. This is the INFJ who moves between contexts with apparent fluency, bringing the full version of themselves to each, while privately knowing that the translation never entirely stops. Temperance is the art of holding tension between worlds without spilling. The INFJ shapeshifter has been practicing this since they were old enough to notice that they read rooms differently from everyone else standing in them. 22 cards. The full map contains more than any single video can carry. But what I have shown you is the structural proof of something that matters. The tarot was always archetypal before it was esoteric, and it was always a description of psychological lives before it was dressed in the language of prophecy. What Jung saw when he studied it was what the INFJ has been sensing all along, that this symbolic system was not pointing outward toward a future. It was pointing inward toward a pattern that already existed, fully formed, in the architecture of a specific kind of mind. Standard descriptions of the INFJ describe traits. They tell you what you are like. They do not tell you what you are for. They do not tell you which life you are living, which archetypal role you are occupying, what the purpose of the particular weight you carry might be. Tarot does not describe traits. It describes lives, and a mind built on introverted intuition, a mind that has always perceived symbolically, that has always sensed meaning layered beneath the visible surface of things, is not encountering the tarot as a new idea. It is encountering a system that was built, whether its creators knew it or not, to be read by this precise cognitive architecture. You were always the intended reader. It simply took 5 centuries to make the introduction. Tell me in the comments which card is yours, not the flattering one, not the aspirational one, the one you recognized before you had finished reading its description. The Power and Myth community is not an audience. It is a gathering of people who have always known they were living inside a larger story, and who came here because they were ready to learn its name. Subscribe if you want to keep tracing the lineage. Until next time, find your power, know your myth.